You know, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they're these incredible foundational stories. But have you ever stopped to wonder, when did they actually happen? Are we talking about stories from the absolute dawn of civilization or from a time much, much later? Well, to find the real answer, we've got to become historical detectives and follow the clues, piece by piece.
So where do these epic tales really fit in? You hear all sorts of theories, right? Some people place them thousands and thousands of years in the past, while others argue for a much more recent setting. But instead of just guessing, we're going to dig in and follow the hard archaeological evidence to see where it really leads us.
Okay, so to solve this puzzle, first we have to get our heads around what I like to call the inheritance problem. See, these epics, they didn't just appear out of thin air. They were born into a world that was already profoundly shaped by a massive ancient civilization that came long before them.
And just look at this timeline. We are dealing with a vast scale here, over 2,000 years of history. Our investigation has to start with our first major suspect, the great Indus Valley Civilization, which really gets going around 3000 BCE.
Now, at first glance, the Indus Valley seems like the most obvious candidate, doesn't it? I mean, this was a huge, incredibly sophisticated urban civilization. So, could this be the world of the Pandavas and Rama? Let's take a closer look and see if the evidence actually connects.
So around 1900 BCE, the great cities of the Indus began to decline. But listen, this wasn't some sudden apocalypse where everything just vanished. It was more of a transformation. As the cities got smaller and people moved, they carried their culture with them, and that left a deep and really powerful inheritance on the land.
And we can see this inheritance in three really key ways. First, demographically. The genetic evidence shows that the population itself is continuous. Second, rituals. Practices like sacred bathing and worshiping nature, they just kept going. And finally, the landscape itself. Think about it. Civilizations might forget their rulers, but they never ever forget their rivers.
With so much continuity, the case seems almost closed, right? It feels like the epics must just be tales that survive from that great Indus age. But is it really that simple?
Well, not quite. The moment we compare the core features of the Indus world to the one we read about in the epics, wow, the mismatch is staggering. The Indus Valley was a Bronze Age civilization, full of merchants and city planners. The epics, they describe an Iron Age world, dominated by warrior aristocrats. One society used bull carts, the other used horse-drawn chariots for war. We're talking about two fundamentally different worlds here.
So here's the crucial distinction we have to make. The Indus Valley provides the deep cultural foundation, the bedrock, but it isn't the actual setting of the story. The search for the right time period has to continue.
All right, so that brings us to the next key piece of the puzzle. And honestly, the most common point of confusion, technology. Was the world of the epics built on copper, or was it built on iron? This is a big one.
And here's a really common trap people fall into. An archaeologist finds a copper tool at a site and immediately assumes, aha, this must be the Copper Age. But that's not really how technology evolves. For centuries, societies used a mix of metals. Just because iron showed up didn't mean copper suddenly disappeared overnight.
This is a really important concept to get our heads around. An archaeological age is defined by its dominant technology, the one that really shapes its economy, its society, its warfare, not its exclusive one. The early Iron Age was full of tools made of copper, bronze, and even stone. But iron was the absolute game changer.
So that leads us to the real question. It's not about finding one or two specific artifacts. It's about the big picture. Could the world of the epics, with its vast kingdoms, huge armies, and massive wars, even function without iron?
And the answer to that is a resounding no. Absolutely not. So now, let's look at the positive evidence that places these epics firmly, and I mean firmly, in the Iron Age.
Just think about what it takes to build the world you read about in the epics. To clear vast forests, like the Dandakaranya forest from the Ramayana, you need strong iron axes. Copper is just too soft. To feed huge populations and support big armies, you need iron plows to create an agricultural surplus. And it's that surplus that allows powerful kingdoms like Kosala and Kuru to even exist. And finally, to wage the kind of massive, sustained wars we see in the Mahabharata, you need durable iron weapons.
And now for the archaeological smoking gun. It's a specific type of pottery called painted gray ware, or PGW for short. Now check this out. Where do we find it? At places like Hastinapura and Kurukshetra, the absolute heartland of the Mahabharata. And the dates? A perfect fit between 1200 and 600 BCE.
And here's the kicker. What do we consistently find at these PGW sites? Iron arrowheads, iron tools, iron slag from making it. The connection is direct and it's undeniable.
So with all this evidence in hand, we can finally put all the pieces together. We can finally place the epics in their correct historical home.
Let's just quickly review our suspects, shall we? The Harappan Bronze Age. Nope, wrong tech, wrong society. The Copper Age. That followed? No way, it couldn't support kingdoms on the massive scale of the epics. What about the later Mauryan Empire? Too bureaucratic, too centralized, a totally different world from the heroic kingdoms we read about. And that leaves us with the early Iron Age, from about 1200 to 800 BCE. It is a perfect match for the technology, the society, and the archaeology.
And that gives us our final, clear timeline. The Indus Valley Civilization provides that deep, ancient foundation. The period after its decline is a time of incredible transformation. And then, starting around 1200 BCE, we enter the early Iron Age. That is the epic world. This is where the stories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata truly find their historical footing.
You know, the ultimate takeaway is probably best summed up by this idea. The epics are post-Indus in form, but Indus-influenced in civilizational depth. They are stories that were absolutely born in the Iron Age, but they carry within them the memories, the rituals, and the landscapes of a much, much older world. And it's really this dual inheritance that makes them so powerful and so timeless.